The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, my name is Jillian Schaefer and I'm the Marketing Coordinator for SWK Technologies. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Inventory Costing and Pricing in Sage 100, presented by Monica Byrne of SWK Technologies. A little housekeeping before we get started. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise down. However, you can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar. To submit a question, look for the questions section in your GoToWebinar. We will answer all questions at the end of the presentation. We are recording this presentation and it will be distributed tomorrow to all attendees as well as to those who registered but were not able to attend. Please take a moment at the end of the presentation to answer our one survey question. With that said, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to attend our webinar. We're here to help you get the most out of your software solutions and help you find an easier way to run your business by providing you software and industry knowledge, tools, and support whenever you need it. So whether you're here doing research for a new solution or you're just here to learn, we'd like to encourage you to ask any questions throughout the webinar. Lastly, as a quick reminder, SWK is constantly sharing important updates and software tips and tricks on our social media channels, so we encourage you to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Monica.
Hi, this is Monica. So we're here today to talk about inventory costing and pricing in Sage 100. And as Jolie mentioned, my name is Monica Byrne. I'm a senior consultant here at SWK. I wanted to share a picture of myself. For those of you that don't know me, you can put a face with a name. I've been with SWK for 14 years and working with the Sage 100 product line for almost 17 years now. Over these years, I've helped hundreds of clients to use Sage 100 to benefit their business. During this time, I've been asked many times, many times, where did this price come from or where did this cost come from? One of the most common misunderstandings in Sage 100 is how a price or cost is determined. So hopefully we're going to put an end to that mystery today. So today we're going to look at the following inventory screens: costing hierarchy, pricing hierarchy, common where did this price cost come from examples, and then we're going to open the floor up for some questions. Please keep in mind, costing and pricing can become very complex. If the questions can't easily be answered to the benefit of the group, I may defer your question to after the webinar so that I can spend the appropriate time addressing it specifically for you, or we can have a consultant that you typically work with help you address that specific issue. I'm going to go through the presentation and show you some information, and then after that, we'll be looking in Sage 100 and showing you some examples. So let's get started. We're going to look at the places where prices and costs are stored in Sage 100. So you've probably noticed there's lots of different places in Sage 100 where costs and prices can reside. And it's important to understand where they are and how they relate. Here you see on the main tab of item maintenance, we have costs and pricing stored in a row towards the bottom of the screen. Depending on certain factors we'll discuss today, certain costs and prices from here will be used. Next is item vendor maintenance. And this is accessed by clicking the More button in the top right of the item screen and selecting vendors. The last cost for the vendor for this item is stored here. Finally, if we're looking at a LIFO, FIFO, lot, or serial item, you will see the cost for each tier here on the cost tab in item maintenance. So those are a couple of places related to an item that we can see these costs and prices that we're going to be looking at today. We see pricing in item pricing maintenance. This is accessed from item maintenance by clicking the More button and then pricing. Another field related to pricing is the price level in customer maintenance on the additional tab. So you'll see that over by the center of the screen of customer maintenance. And finally, under the inventory management setup and then price code maintenance, we have another level on which we can set pricing. Please note the price level can work in conjunction with item pricing maintenance as well as price code maintenance. Additionally, price codes are associated with an item on the main tab in item maintenance. This should become clearer when we look at some examples later in the webinar. So let's take a look at the costing side of things for a few minutes. What determines the cost of our items? As we just saw, an item's cost can come from multiple places in Sage 100. Let's talk about purchase order costing. Very simply, when looking at costing in Sage 100 related to POs, there are two factors. The first is vendor pricing or vendor-specific pricing, and the second is the item's valuation. So the valuation that you have assigned and item maintenance to that item. We can set vendor-specific pricing in vendor price level maintenance located under the purchase order setup menu. The pricing can be set by vendor, product line, or item code. Be careful of setting a vendor price level. This applies to all items. And this, as I mentioned before, this vendor-specific pricing is the first priority in the costing hierarchy. So if you go to do a purchase order for a specific vendor, if they have vendor-specific pricing, that's going to be used first. And like I said, when you're setting that up, be careful of that vendor price level. If you set up a price level for the vendor with no other identification specified, it's going to apply that price to every item that you order from that vendor. And I'm going to show you how that looks a little later as well. Here's an example of the vendor price level set up by product line. When creating a purchase order, this is the first place Sage 100 looks for costing. So, but this vendor price level maintenance. This is the highest priority in our costing hierarchy. This is key because sometimes we inadvertently set up a flat vendor cost. This is the #1 reason we see incorrect costs on purchase orders, receipts, and other purchase order entries. And like I said, we'll look at an example of that later. Next priority in our hierarchy, an item's valuation method. As you may know, there are 6 valuation methods available in Sage 100. Here's how they work. Standard cost. Items with this valuation use the standard cost listed in item maintenance, assuming no vendor-specific costing is set up. What if this cost is 0? So Sage, you're going to purchase an item, the standard cost is 0 in item maintenance. What happens? If it is, the system will then look to the last cost. So that's that costing field on the right-hand side of your item maintenance screen. If that's 0, the warehouse average cost is used. And if that's 0, the item's average cost is used. If it has nothing in any of those places, if it's all 0, it's not going to provide you with the cost. You're going to have to type that in on the purchase order. So if your item has an average valuation, items with this valuation first look to use the warehouse's average cost for the item. So it's important to note that Sage does keep track of the average cost by warehouse. If that is 0, it looks to the item's average cost. So that's on the main tab in item maintenance. And then the last cost is used if that is 0, and then finally the standard cost for the item. So you can see how it's kind of going through this wave. If it doesn't have the cost it expects to, it moves on to the next place that it can look for the cost, and that's how it continues to go through. The last of the 4 valuations, well actually the last 4 valuations, LIFO, FIFO, lot, or serial, all behave the same way. They first look to the vendor's last cost. So if that cost is 0, then the last cost of the item. And if that's 0, then the standard cost. If all of that is 0, it's going to look at the warehouse's average cost and then the item's average cost. So it has like 5 different places to go if they're all 0, but it's going to look first to the vendor's last cost. Keep in mind, we're still talking about purchase orders to your vendor at this point. So just to recap, vendor-specific pricing always takes priority on purchase orders. Then the valuation, that's it. And like I said, we'll look at some examples of this later so that it becomes clearer. One more place cost can be confusing is on a sales order or sales order invoice. The first thing to remember is the cost posted is based on the item's valuation. A standard cost item is going to use the standard cost recorded on the main page in item maintenance. An item with an average cost valuation will use the average cost first for the warehouse, and then the average cost on the main tab in item maintenance if it doesn't have a cost for that particular warehouse, an average cost. Keep in mind the average cost is a rolling average of the cost of an item maintained by the system. One key to average cost is that it is maintained by warehouse. Each warehouse item combination can have its own. Next is FIFO and LIFO, so first in, first out, or last in, first out. They're managed similarly in Sage 100. For this valuation, the system records the actual costs of items when they're received in. We call those tiers typically. And then when selling them, the item's cost comes from the next available cost tier. So if the item is FIFO, the first tiers in are relieved first. If the item is LIFO, the last tiers in are relieved first. For lot or serial valuations, the actual cost is also maintained when items are received based on either the lot or serial number. So lot applies to a group of items associated with the same number, and serial means you have one serial number per item. When sold, the user has to choose which lot or serial number is being sold, and the appropriate actual cost of that item is used. So the key there is to remember your valuation. Okay, so that explains the cost side. Let's look at pricing. Each time an item code is entered on a sales order or invoice, Sage 100 checks the customer, date, item, and quantity to determine which pricing method to use. This establishes the unit price that will display for the item. However, the unit price can be manually overridden by the user, so keep that in mind. So here's our pricing hierarchy from highest to lowest priority. Promotion pricing comes first. In Sage 100, we can mark items on sale for specific dates, etc. If a sales promotion is in effect for the current date and the promotion price is less than the calculated price, this will be used. So keep that in mind. It's got to be lower than the calculated price. Next is contract pricing, or in other words, customer-specific pricing. A customer price schedule can be set up in item maintenance by clicking the More button and choosing prices. The next priority would be item pricing. For the item based on the customer price level. So in customer maintenance on the additional tab, we can set a price level for a customer, and then we can set item-specific pricing for that price level by selecting the More button and then pricing in item maintenance. Additionally, we can have specific pricing based on a price level set up in the same area, and this would be the next priority. Another option in Sage 100 is for pricing is to use price codes. And this is the next priority in the pricing hierarchy. A price code is set up in inventory setup, price code maintenance. A price level can be assigned here in conjunction with the price code. So a price code with a price level would be the next priority, and then the price code with no price level would follow. Finally, if there is none of the pricing mentioned above, the standard price from item maintenance will be used. So that's the last look, is that standard price field in item maintenance. So just to review, the pricing hierarchy, highest to lowest, is promotion pricing, contract pricing, item pricing based on a price level if the customer has a price level, item pricing with no price level, the price code based on the price level, or a price code with no price level. You can see how it can get pretty confusing here, right? All right, so let's look at some examples in Sage 100. So I'm just going to close my PowerPoint and take you over to my Sage 100, and we're going to look through some of these examples here today. So I'm going to go into purchase order first, and we're going to look at some things from the costing side related to a purchase order. So I'm going to look at a specific PO that I have set up, and I'll show you some things about this. So our vendor here is Airway, and when I go to the Lines tab, you'll see I have an item selected here. It's a 2-drawer file without a lock, and you'll see that my unit cost is $34.25. So I'm going to go up into item maintenance for this particular item. So I'm going to use my little link to there. And you'll see when I look at this in item maintenance, this item is a FIFO valuation. The last cost for this item is $34.25. So when I go back here, you can see based on this customer or this vendor on the lines tab, I'm getting a $34.25 price. So that tells me that this vendor doesn't have any special pricing set up. There's no price code set up or vendor pricing levels set up for this particular vendor. Now, if I change this vendor, so I'm going to go in here and change this vendor to my Container Corp. And when I go to the lines, I'm going to add this same item into the purchase order again. This time, you'll notice already that the cost has changed here. And it's $31.11. So let's try to figure out where this cost came from. Again, if I go to item maintenance, $31.11, this is a FIFO item. So on the costing side, that doesn't really matter to me. My last cost is $34.25. My standard cost is $32.75. My average cost is $34.25. Based on all of this information in item maintenance, I really have to assume that there's got to be a vendor price level in play here or some kind of vendor pricing in play here. So I'm going to go back to Sage 100 and go to my inventory setup. Oh, actually, I'm going to go to my accounts payable setup, am I? I always forget where this is located, so please bear with me. It's actually purchase order, and I do this every single time. I'm going to go to purchase order setup and go to vendor price level maintenance, and I'm going to take a look and see what we have. So I can do a lookup with the flashlight and see what we have in here, and I'm going to start looking at some of these things. So remember, my purchase order, I changed it to Container Corporation, and I actually have a vendor price level maintenance for Container Corporation. And my pricing type is by the product line. So if my product line is WF&A, then these are my pricing discounts, 5% for 1 to 5, 7.5%, 10%, etc. So let's go back to our purchase order and let's see if that's our issue. So of course, if I go here and I start scrolling down in my additional fields here, I should see my product line. And sure enough, my product line is WF&A for this particular item. So my cost is coming in from the fact that I have a vendor price level set up. If I order 1 to 5 of these, I get a 5% discount. So that's the first area. So next I'm going to show an item, some more item-specific vendor pricing, but we're going to look at a different purchase order number. So let's go into that purchase order. And I might have my purchase order numbers incorrect, so let's go down here, and I think it's this one that we need. So I'm going to go over here to my lines tab, and you'll see here that I've put in items on this purchase order. And each item that I put in is coming in with a unit cost of $10. That's probably not what I wanted to happen, I would say, because this item, which is a file cabinet, and this item, which is a desk, probably have different costs, correct? But you'll notice if I continue to put in another item here and I order one of those, it's also coming in at a cost of $10. This is a common scenario I see with my clients. They call and they're like, this one vendor is assigning the exact same cost no matter what item I put in. Now, the reason that's happening is if we go back to our vendor price level maintenance under purchase order setup, and we do a lookup, you can see here for that particular vendor, 01STEV, I have an overall vendor pricing discount or cost set up. This happens frequently, and it does happen by mistake sometimes. Users will go in and choose the vendor and start putting it in and say, oh, I'm not sure that this is what I want to do. They'll click accept. A lot of times this cost is 0 because you'd actually have to change this cost when you set it up. And then they hit accept, and then users go to enter a purchase order for that vendor, and they're consistently getting that 0 price. But that's why it's happening. So you'll see if I go in here and simply delete this, for my Stevens supply, and I go back to my purchase order and add in another item, you'll see that the pricing starts to come in appropriately. So now if I add in my D2000, my cost to my vendor is going to start to come in appropriately. So that's one of the most common things. Okay, so let's look at some sales order pricing and cost. I'm going to close here. I'm not going to save my changes there, and I'm going to close my vendor price level maintenance. I think the pricing on the purchase order side is a little bit easier than the sales order side for pricing and costing, just because on the purchase order side, it's really, remember, just looking at the item valuation and the vendor price level maintenance. So those are the ways that it determines that cost. So on the sales order side, let's look at one of the orders that I've got in here for today. We're going to open up order number 184. So this order is to my customer, American Business Futures. I'm going to go to my lines tab. I have this HON letter file that we've been looking at before. You'll notice my price is $42. Maybe you called me and said, hey, why is the price $42? Because when I look in item maintenance, I start reviewing this item and I see a price, first of all, a standard price of $84. So I'm like, what is going on with this particular item? So when going back and reviewing my pricing hierarchy, remember the first thing we need to look at is the sales promotion. Then we need to look at any price codes, customer specific price levels, those kinds of things. So I would start at the very top and I'd say, okay, so there is a price code here. And I'll tell you, I always forget about the sales promotion. So I usually go and I look at my price code. There is a standard price code set up in here. So if I go back to inventory and I go to price code maintenance, I can look at that standard price code. So I can say, okay, this is standard quantity pricing. I'm ordering how many? 5 on my order. Let me make this bigger again. So I'm ordering 5 on my order. So let's go back to price code maintenance. 5 to 9 would be a 3% discount. So this is a price discount on the standard price. Let's see if I have any price levels set up for this price code. I do not. So if there's no price level listed there, it means there's no price levels available for this particular price code. So basically any item in item maintenance that's assigned this price code of standard would provide a 3% discount based on a quantity of from 5 to 9, 7% discount, and then 10% discount depending on the quantity ordered. So let's go and see. So 3% of $84 is roughly $2 and something. So I would expect that to reduce the price by a few dollars. And when I go back to my sales order, you'll see it's reducing the price by a lot. So this is usually where I say to myself, there's something else going on here. What could it possibly be? And this is a common issue too. Sometimes users will play with this functionality, but what this is amounting to is a sales promotion. So under inventory on the main tab, there's an area called sales promotion maintenance. And when we go into sales promotion maintenance, I'm going to do a lookup here. You'll see I have a fall sale set up and I have a Memorial Day sale set up. Now we're working with our demo data in the year 2025. So let's assume it's September 16th of 2025. I think that's the date on that sales order. So actually our fall sale would come into play. Now, just because you have a sale doesn't mean it's applied to all of your items. So when you create this sale, and you'll see this is showing a 50% discount, you can apply that sale to a bunch of different items, however you want to apply it. You can do it by product line, by specific item code, maybe a price code or a vendor. All of those types of things apply. But to be sure that this is what's happening with my scenario, I'm going to look at the sales promotion report. That's how we tell what items the sales promotion is applied to. So I know that this is I'm probably being affected by this fall sale. So I'm going to go ahead and put that one in. And I certainly could put it in the item code if I wanted to, just to define it for what item I'm looking for. But I'm actually just going to preview it with all the items that are on this promotion, just so that you can see it. So you'll notice when I preview that with my promotions, I took it away. I went to maximize it, and I think I killed it. So let's make this bigger, maybe make the font a little bigger. You'll see that here's my sales promotion report sorted by item code. So all of these item codes are actually applicable to this particular sales promotion. And you'll see when you look at our item that we're looking at, the 1001 HON H252, that the retail price is 84, the standard price is 84, and our sales price is 42. Aha! That makes sense to us, right? Because if we go back to our sales order, we can see we are getting a unit price of $42. So this particular example, our price is coming from our sales promotion, which is the highest level of the pricing hierarchy. All right, so let's look at another sales order here that has a different scenario, and this is sales order 186. So this is for Avnet processing. The order date was 9/16/25. So of course, if I had a question, I could go back to that sales promotion report and see if my item falls into that area. My price is coming in at $12. And let's go to item maintenance and see what that looks like for this particular item. So this is part of the product line cables and accessories. You'll notice that there's a price code assigned here. So that's a key for us, that there's a price code assigned. Our price is typically $12, and that's what it's coming in at. So I would say in this particular scenario, I think I'm in pretty good shape. I know where my price is coming from. It's coming from my standard price. Now let's go to price code maintenance. Maybe we say we didn't expect this to be $12. Why is this $12? So we expected it to use a price based on the price level or the price code maintenance. So I'm going to go look at the price code maintenance, and we're going to see what it looks like there. So let's go to inventory setup price code maintenance, and we know that CAB1 is assigned to this. And you'll see here from quantity 1 to 100, there's no discount allowed. So that makes sense, right? When I look at my sales order, if I order 1, I'm getting a unit price of $12. That makes sense. Let's see what happens if I change my quantity ordered to 101. Nice, our price changes to $10.80. So we can be confident that that's the reason why, because when we look at the price code maintenance, from 101 to 500 quantity-wise, we're going to get a 5% discount. So that makes sense to me. So I would go ahead and say, okay, this is where it came from then. It's the price code assigned to the particular item. So let's look at another order here. So let's say order 187, for instance. When I go to the lines tab, actually, let's stop at the header. So we're looking at Breslin, same date, 9/16/2025. When I go to the lines, you'll see I have my 1001 HON H252. Another thing that can come into play here, and we've seen it, is we can have price codes, but we also can have price levels. So we would also want to look and see if we have any price level when we're looking to investigate these to see if a price level is coming into play. In this case, a price level is not coming into play. And if I go down even further and look at my product line, I'm going to see this is WF&A. So I can always go to my price code maintenance and look at the WF&A, see if there's any pricing assigned to the WF&A. And there is not anything assigned to that that I can see. However, we have to check item maintenance, remember, for this particular item. And I think I have it open. Nope, not for that item. Let's close some of these up. Right here, I have it open, and it is part of the WF&A product line, and it does have a price code of standard. So now let me go to back to my price codes, and I'm going to say, okay, let's look at the standard price code, because I know that that's what my item has. So 1 to 4, I get 0 discount. 5 to 9, I get 3% discount. You'll see if I go here and I put in a quantity of 6, my price is still $42. Well, why would that be? We would expect to see our price code calculate the pricing 3% off. The reason it's not calculating that is because back to my item maintenance for this particular item, my retail price is $84. Remember this item? It's got a sales promotion of 50% off. So that sales promotion of 50% off is a better price than my price code would offer. So in Sage 100, Sage is looking to offer the best price to the customer based on that pricing hierarchy. So that's why our $42 is assigned. So let's take a look at another item. So this is a cable, and you'll see I ordered one. The unit price is $20.50. You can do a price lookup here too, and we'll look at that in a second. I'm going to open item maintenance for this, and you'll see that in item maintenance, my price is $34.50. So I'm getting a price of $20.50, and I'm looking to find out where that's coming from. I have a price code of standard, so we know that we've looked at that price code of standard. So the price code 1 to 4 would have a 0% discount. So now I want to look further and see where that pricing is coming from. So I would want to check and see, do I have a price level or do I have a promotional pricing in place here? And I don't believe we do, because the only sale that we had during this date was 50% off. And this one is not showing 50% off. So what could be the other thing that comes into play for pricing here? What's next in our hierarchy of pricing? And that would be customer price level. So let's see if we have an item specific customer price level. So you'll see here, if we go to more and we go to pricing, here we have item pricing. We can actually scroll through the pricing available for this item, and you'll see we do have a customer price schedule set up for this particular customer, for this particular item, and the price is $20.50. So, aha, mystery solved, right? That's where our price came from. So if this was an error, we could delete this price, the item pricing maintenance, and it would go through the hierarchy again and recalculate the pricing appropriately. But we figured out the mystery. And of course, also on the sales side, there's costing information to look at as well. So when I look at one of these items, I can also see the cost on this order, or the cost of this item if I scroll up here. So it's $34.25. I can investigate that cost based on the item's valuation, like we discussed. So in this particular case, if I go to this item, we're going to say, okay, what's the item valuation? It's FIFO. So this is going to be a first in, first out situation. So it's going to take the cost of my first tier. Sometimes it's not obvious, because you'll notice the cost is $34.25 on my order, and the last cost is $34.25 as well. Sometimes the last cost, of course, may be different. But in order to investigate the costing for a LIFO, FIFO, lot, or serial item, you really have to go to tab 7, the cost detail tab, and investigate. So you'll see I have a receipt here of 10 items on 6/4/2020. Those items are going to be what I sell first, because this is, I think it's a FIFO. Yes, first in, first out. So it's going to take the oldest receipt that has a quantity available and apply that first. So you'll see $34.25 is our answer. If this tier didn't exist and there was actually items in this tier, our cost would have been $33.50. So you can see how you can use what we learned with valuation along on the costing side to try to figure out where the costs of items are coming. In similar fashion, this one's $16.75. And if I go and look here, I can see that this is a standard cost item. So it's going to apply the standard cost that's grayed out here no matter what. Even if this last cost was different, let's say we say that was $17.50 or something. When we go back here and add that same item again, it's still going to come in with the same costing, $16.75, because that's the standard cost for that particular item. So those are the ways that you can investigate both the cost and the pricing. So another thing I wanted to show you was over distributions. So you've probably seen them with LIFO and FIFO items. We can have over distributions, meaning we sold it before we received it in. So Sage doesn't really know where to get the cost from. So you'll see, and I'm going to pull up an item here. Let's go to this item. We're going to look at item D1000 CD. So this is a desk center drawer. And you'll notice here that our standard cost is $20. Our average cost is $20. This is a FIFO item, but in our cost detail, we have no costs available right now. So you'll see we did, and we have an order out there, and we're going to look at that order as well. And you'll see that we have some transactions here. Let me just change my transaction date to be 9/1/2025 to 9/30/2025. So what you'll see here is I sold this. This was on a sales order. My invoice number is 100065, and I sold 4 of them. Because there was no cost tiers available, so that cost was 0. There was no cost tiers. Then it used the next available item, which was the standard cost for the item. So it used the $20 when I sold it, but let's say I receive it at a higher price. So let's say I sold it before I received it, which obviously it shouldn't happen in sequential order that way, but in real life it does happen. Your receiving department doesn't get it in before you sell it, but it's actually in the warehouse. It does happen to clients frequently. So let's go here and look at our orders. So you'll see here I have an order out here to United Computers, and when I go to the lines tab, you'll note that I did order 4 of them, and I have for a cost of $25. So that's my newest cost on that item. So you'll see if I go and receive that item, let's go back to purchase order, and we're going to do a receipt of goods entry on that item. And that purchase order number is 10035. For United Computers, we're going to receive the complete purchase order. I'll receive the invoice at the same time, doesn't really matter, for $100, and then we're going to update this. Just making sure my date's okay. And I'm just going to go through and update these. And I'm not going to update the GL at this point, just for time's sake. But now you'll notice if I go back and look at that item in item maintenance, our center drawer. Oh, and of course I brought it into the wrong warehouse too, so that's an even further problem. But you would see if I did it in the right warehouse that we had an over distribution on this particular item, and you'll see it in your transactions tab typically. And when you see that over distribution, what that means is you sold it at a different cost than what you received it in at, or you sold it first. These types of items end up on your purchases clearing report. So when you go into inventory and you go to your negative tier report, then you'll have to run your inventory negative tier report and make an adjustment to that. And that's how that scenario happens. That's how the costing sometimes does not even follow the rules you would expect to see in Sage, because there's a negative tier available for it. So I'm going to run that negative tier report and show you some things on here. So you'll see on here, there are some things that have a negative tier report available on it. And this tells you that you received them in at a different cost than you sold them at. You sold them first. So let's look at one of those items and see if it shows the way I expect it to show. So let's do D1000 desk. And let's see if we can see it in the cost detail. We might have to put in we have all receipt dates and we have all warehouses. So there it is. So you'll see there's an over distribution here. And this is how you get those over distributions, is because you sold it for a different cost than it came in at. And you'll also see it over on this side. If we look at all dates, we should be able to see those transactions as well. Look at all of those. So we sold on this sales order 350 at the cost of 450. And when we look at the cost detail, it's different. So that's how you end up with those over distributions, the difference between the sales order and the purchase order cost, or the sales order didn't have the correct cost when you sold it because the purchase receipt wasn't done. So let's look at a couple of reports that we can use to help us in this costing and pricing. So of course, on the purchase order side, if I go to setup and I go to my vendor price level maintenance, we know we can see all our vendor price levels there. We can print a purchase order vendor price level listing there. You just click the printer at the bottom. And when we preview the purchase order vendor price level listing, this will give us an idea of what our price levels are that exist. Now remember, I deleted the one that was just for the vendor, but you'll see here, it's gonna say here on this product line, WF&A, this one's for a particular item. We have some item specific pricing. Let me make that a little bigger. So this one was based on product line, this one's based on item. If you see one based on vendor, that's a red flag. That's where it's going to apply the same cost to every item that you purchase from that vendor. So sometimes reviewing this report is insightful to see if you have any of those set up. And of course, a lot of times you're going to catch it on the purchase order side because you're going to do a purchase order, it's going to be received in, but then you're going to get the invoice and it's a different cost and you'll be like, oh yeah, we had a problem with our purchase order. But it can be tricky to fix at that point because then you'll have a cost variance and it's going to go into the purchases clearing and all of that. So it's always helpful to have the correct pricing or costing on a purchase order to start with. It makes the process go through much smoother. A couple other places to look for costing and pricing information. In accounts receivable, there's actually a standard report, and it's called AR Customer Pricing Report. And I think it's unless you have some modifications or anything, it should be the last one on your list. And when you look here, I'm going to view it for everyone, but you'll get the customer pricing report that'll show you how the pricing is set up for each of our customers. And you'll see here's my customer. For this product line, this is all of their pricing information. So you can kind of consider this a price sheet, but you could also, you could print out and use as pricing for that particular customer. Also use it to isolate issues with pricing related to a customer. It's helpful in both of those scenarios. We also, in the inventory management module under reports, we have an inventory price list. And you'll notice with most of these reports, there's a lot of different options. Like, do you want to show the price schedule along with all the standard prices? So I usually say yes to that so that I can see if there's any specific price schedules. So here you can look through and see the item based on quantity, what the price will be. Remember, this one has a quantity tiers. And it'll show you all the appropriate pricing based on that. And then, of course, for costing on the inventory side, you can always look at your inventory valuation report. That will show you your costs for all of your inventory items as they sit in your inventory. One thing I didn't mention, so lastly, I'll mention this, is also you want to keep in mind related to your customers that we have customer price levels as well. So I'm going to look at this customer, Shepherd Motor Works. So you'll see here on the additional tab, we can assign a price level to a customer as well. So I'm going to assign a price level of A to this customer. And how that's going to come into play is in our, if I go back to inventory setup and go to our price code maintenance, we can assign a price level based on a price code also. So if I go here and I'll say, okay, I have cables. So the cable pricing, I get 5% off and then 10% off. But if my customer, and there is a customer with a price level of A, I'm not going to give them any price discount for 1 to 100, but 101 to 500, I'm going to give them 10%. So if we went in and did a sales order for this customer for a item that was assigned the price code of CAB1, then we would see this customer would get a 10% discount based on their price level of A. So that's the final kind of play that can come into your audit of where your pricing and costing comes from. And as I mentioned earlier, if you have trouble, if you're not seeing the appropriate price, you're not seeing the appropriate cost somewhere, just let your consultant here at SWK know. They can usually help you figure out where it's coming from. Some of these are not very obvious. I actually, when I was preparing for this webinar, came across one, and it took me a little while to figure out where it came from, and I've been doing this quite some time. So don't worry if you have to reach out and say, hey, where is this coming from? We'll help you figure it out, and then usually it's really enlightening for the future when you're trying to figure out either pricing or costing. So that's all I have for you today. We're going to turn it over to Jolene for a moment and see if we have any questions that I can answer, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Monica. We'll now open it up for questions. If you have any questions, please enter them into the question section of your GoToWebinar. We'll give that a minute in case any come through. And just to remind everyone, we do have a subject matter expert here. This is a great way to have your questions answered in real time. We do have a few that came through during the presentation, Monica.
Okay.
The first is, does average price only use prices from lots that aren't empty?
No. It will average in a 0 if you have well, let's say when you say lots, that would assume lot valuation. So I'll answer that the best I can. If it's an average cost item and you received it in at a 0 cost, that cost would be averaged into that average. It does not disregard the zeros.
Okay.
So you could end up with a 0.
Perfect. The second is, how can you look up prices for lots that have been closed?
How can you look up prices for lots that have been closed? So typically, if you have a lot item, and let's see if I can find one in here. So if we want to see costing for a lot item after the lot is finished, we should still, let's go through here and see. Oh, here's one, a lot. If you go to cost detail, when the quantity is 0, you'll still see the unit cost there. I wish I had one that was 0, but I'm not seeing one right now. But if it is a 0 quantity, that means there's 0 left in the lot. You'll still see the unit cost that it came in at.
Can price codes use dollars spent instead of quantity ordered?
So no, it cannot. But a way to accommodate that, and you could probably look at this if necessary, is in your sales order setup, and depending on the version of Sage 100 you're in, this hasn't been around forever, but there is, and I'm going to see if I can find it for you, on the line entry, there's an item pricing by total quantity. So you can actually apply item pricing by the total quantity. So if you need more information on how that works or to see if that would work for your scenario, you could look at that and see. The other thing is you can have an overall discount on a customer. So depending on your scenario, that may work as well. So in customer maintenance on our additional tab, we can also have a discount rate for that customer. So that can also be applied. You can also apply a discount rate on the sales order for one time. If necessary, that would obviously be calculating it kind of manually. There are options to accommodate it. We would just have to review your specific scenario.
Excellent. Which versions of Sage 100 are you using?
Oh, perfect. I'm using Sage 100 version 2020 right now, which is the latest that's out.
And then one last one that's come through. Your UI is different than mine. How did you get the nicer looking UI?
So this user interface, I think, is available, I want to say from 2017, versions 2017 to 2020. So if you're on that version, on those versions, you do have an option. And actually, what am I going to do? I'm going to show my desktop for a moment. And I'm just going to open a different version of Sage 100 because in 2020, this user interface is the only one available. But let's go here and we're going to look at, let's look at Sage 100 version 2019. Oh, I have to close my current one. Sorry, let's close that. And we're going to look at 2019.
Monica, we're still seeing the Sage 100 2020 with the show desktop icon. If that's...
Oh, you are?
Yep.
Okay. When I log into the new one, I will see if I can fix that. Oh, it says my show screen is paused. That's interesting. We're going to show it again. How about that? Do you see that?
Yep,
it should just be the Sage 100 screen. Okay, perfect. So in here, we have something called change user settings. So if you go into change user settings from 2017, 2018, and 2019, those versions of Sage 100, you have desktop options. I'm on the standard desktop, and the classic desktop is what the older versions look like. So the standard is the updated interface. So in order for this to show, I would have to change it to classic and then log back in and it would go back to the old interface. So you might want to see if, depending on your version, if you have an option for a different interface. Additionally, one more thing to mention related to that is if you have Sage 100C, which is our subscription licensing plan rather than a perpetual licensing plan, you also have color options available to you. So this could be something that plays into that question as well. So I can swap different color options for my Sage interface. So hopefully that answered the question based on what version you're using. But if not, please let us know and we'll get you an answer.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Monica, for your informative presentation and for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.